Our guest today is a professional mental health expert. Her name, Beverly Hutchman. She has her master's degree from Multnomah University in Oregon. Beverly, you are also affiliated with many other organizations. Would you tell us what they are, please?
Well, I have an undergraduate degree in family studies from Corbin University. I am a member of PsyChi, which is the International Honor Society for Psychology. I'm a member of the AACC, the American Association of Christian Counselors.
Give us a rundown of the type of work that you have been affiliated with over the past few years, or several years.
I began working with youth at the State Mental Hospital for Children, and many of these kids were the product of abuse, sexual abuse, or severe neglect, physical abuse, all kinds of abuse. They had very similar diagnoses usually. A lot of reactive attachment disorder, a lot of psychopathic traits or borderline personality traits, a lot of bipolar or mood disorder, not otherwise specified diagnosis, and a lot of PTSD, depression. That's mostly what we saw. We still saw some schizophrenia and other diagnoses as well. Oh goodness, things like that were eating disorders.
You've been working with at-risk youth for many years, haven't you?
Yes, I have.
And more recently, you worked with men in prison. Tell us how that went.
I worked with men at the Oregon State Penitentiary. The group that I worked with, I selected for a specific threshold group where I was helping to prepare them for release. They all were high-risk maximum security men and would be released within 18 months. And I intentionally picked those with mental health diagnosis as well. It went really well. I enjoyed it, learned a lot. The group was very successful. Also provided one-on-one counseling for the men in the group and for other inmates who requested counseling.
You also worked with Linn County District Attorney as a child advocate, didn't you?
Actually, I was a victim advocate, so I worked with all different kinds of victims. I began working with child sex abuse cases, burglaries, elder abuse cases, things like that, and then I was switched over to domestic violence cases, and there were so many of those. On average, I had 160 domestic violence cases at a time.
That's a big workload.
That's a big workload. I think that being a victim advocate was really interesting. It taught me a lot about the ropes of navigating through the judicial system. And that's just a whole different animal than what I'd seen before, and helped me to understand when I went to the prison also. Well, I was actually at the district attorney's office before I went to the prison. So I was kind of seeing both sides, and it was really odd because I had first worked with children, and I saw the crazy damage that happens when a child is neglected and abused. And then I saw victims, and I made first contact with the victims and kept close records of where they were at in their cases, went to court all day long, at least twice a week. And then I went to the prison, to this maximum security men's prison, and it was like, wow, how different. And I thought, can I do this? These are the people that may have hurt my kids. You know, it's the same area. And these are the people that may have hurt my victims. And I actually ran into some of the people on my caseloads when I was interviewing for the class, the threshold class. And of course that's a conflict of interest. They weren't in the class because that wouldn't be right. Because I want to be objective and to really help them. I don't want to be one of the people that help put them behind bars in that case.
Tonight you're speaking on parenting. You are going to teach people proper ways to parent so they can avoid the tragedies that you work with almost every day.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Please, Beverly, tell us the subject that you are going to present to us on parenting.
I'm going to start with parents and their relationship with one another, and then I'm going to move all the way through to simply blessing your kids and giving them your blessing and giving them support as they learn and make mistakes in their life.
And the parents and their relationship is where the child comes in. Mm-hmm. And this is where the child learns, because the child learns what he lives.
They really do. And I always believe that prevention is better than trying to cure someone later. It's really hard. Nobody's impossible. But it's really hard to help someone when they've been hurt so badly. And what I found in prison was that almost all of the men had also been victims themselves of some form of abuse. So it just perpetuates itself. So the best thing to do is go back to parenting and go back to the beginning. And if we start with the relationship of the parents before they even have a child, that's a good idea. I mean, people prepare their bodies and get healthy before they get pregnant, but I don't think they realize the significance and the profound impact that the relationship with each other has on their children.
You're going to teach people tonight how to be really good parents, what you need to succeed, what you need to avoid the negativity, what you need to get the best results in parenting.
Yes. And so often, I think it's interesting, parents will buy all these computer games and all these things because they want to have this successful, smart child and send them to the very best preschool and buy them the very best clothes. But they don't realize that even more important than that is their relationship with each other as parents and the impact that has on their children and their interaction with their children, the time that they give their children is really huge, and that's more important. I mean, a child doesn't really need stuff. I mean, they can actually, they probably do learn more from the box and the wrapping paper and the ribbon and playing with that than they do from whatever was in it. And so a child, they learn by touching and exploring and that kind of thing. And we want to encourage that. We want to encourage what they're interested in too, and let them lead and interact with them as they lead, but set very firm, specific boundaries at the same time.
Define a good relationship.
A good relationship between parents is when it's supportive, when they're supportive of one another and they love one another. And studies show that parents that support one another are much better parents. That it directly affects how they interact with the child. And so I saw a lot of studies on mothering and how mothers would not parent as well and not be as nurturing to their children, not as attentive when they were in an unhappy marriage. But I was also surprised to see how fathers are even more affected than the mothers. And they really are. And so
give us an example of that.
Fathers have less confidence in their parenting than mothers do. Studies show that. And so women need to really support and encourage their husbands, to help them along, to be a parent, or to just let them know that they're doing a great job. Because if a man doesn't feel supported in being a parent, or he feels like his wife doesn't approve of how he interacts with the child, he backs off. Or a lot of times what they do is they don't parent well, and they get kind of rough and kind of intrusive parenting, because they feel awkward and uncomfortable. And in parenting, they don't know what they're doing. And, new mothers don't know what they're doing either. But the man is more self-conscious about it than the woman. So men need the woman's support. And it's been also found that women tend to act as kind of a gatekeeper on how much the man interacts with the children. Because her values and what she sees as important in the family relationship, as far as the father's interaction with the children, directly affects how much that father steps up to the plate and does things. And it also directly affects whether he stays away. So a lot of times moms actually keep dads away by the way they treat the father, like he's not doing a good enough job. So I wanted to mention that babies that have parents that have a good relationship have more regular schedules, they sleep better, they have better eating habits, and all their little scheduling and timing things are good. And they're much happier babies. And we see that also when parents are happier, the children's behavior is happier. Kids that are in households where the parents don't get along act out. You see a lot of disobedience and depression, too, with children that are in households where the parents don't get along. So I just really want to stress that parents need to put a real effort into their relationship, probably before even having a child. And then also realize that 59% of all new parents experience a decline in their marital satisfaction. So I want to normalize that when a baby's born, things are really different for a bit, actually forever, but it takes a little while to adjust. And so you still got 40% that aren't negatively affected, but that's a large number that are. And if you realize that that's normal, then you can work on it, consciously work on your relationship, make sure you have time for one another and treat each other really good and be supportive with one another.
If they were educated more about what to expect in parenting, they'd know what to deal with, wouldn't they?
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I don't think they realize. Some people think that having a baby is going to make their marriage better, but the studies show that if you have a good relationship before the baby's born, it's not going to hurt your relationship. But usually you do fine. But if you don't have a good relationship before the baby's born, it is not going to make your relationship better. It's probably going to make your relationship worse.
So a child presents a stress on the relationship.
Yes, and the best indicator of how well parents are going to adjust to being new parents is how well adjusted they are before they become parents. How stressful is their life before they become parents? Do they have good social supports before they become parents? Do they have friends, family? What is their life like? If their life is a mess before they have a baby, when they have a baby, then that is a real good predictor that it's not going to go as well as it might. I mean, often it doesn't go well. So, you want to have that good health of in your life to make sure you're in a good place before you have a baby, if you can.
Do you have some advice about exactly how people can do this?
Parents need to make an intentional effort to be there for one another, to support one another, to just really be looking out for each other before the baby's born and after the baby comes. Keep your relationship strong. A lot of times the mom will be very, very close to the baby, which is great, and dad might just back off. But you want to reach out to one another and keep the lines of communication open and let your husband know how much he means to you. And your wife too, because if the wife is feeling isolated and things aren't going well and he's staying away, then that also negatively affects the parenting and affects the child's behaviors. The child becomes fussy, doesn't have good sleeping habits and routines, and it just gets worse and worse and can go in a negative cycle. But you can change that through caring and loving.
So parents should really make a deliberate attempt to have time for each other.
Yes. And
to make time to be a family together and all enjoy each other's company as well.
Make it a priority. Mm-hmm. I want to talk about nurturant fathering. Nurturant fathering wasn't even thought about, that I know of, before the 70s. Dads weren't expected to nurture the children and help raise the children. But in the 70s, men started being expected to take more of a role in parenting. I think it's interesting that this correlates with when women started working more. And women seem to have such a huge impact on how much men are involved with the children. The women's expectations really do make a big difference in how much the man's involved. So in the 70s, we have more dads getting involved with nurturing parenting. Well, it's really neat because it's shown that the nurturant father has some very positive effects on the children. And in some ways, it's very different from the effects the mother has. The nurturant father increases self-esteem in a child, cognitive functioning, and also social competence in children. And the social competence piece is a real biggie because it affects a child more than the mother's mothering does.
Wow.
Yes.
Most people would be surprised to hear that.
Yes, they would. And one of the main differences is how fathers relate to their children. The mother is usually taking care of the child's needs, and when she plays, she's usually doing things like patty cake or peekaboo or things where they're mimicking each other. But a man doesn't do it like that. Generally, fathers still spend only about a third of the time with children as mothers do. But the way they play is so different. It's more boisterous and emotional, and it's not just mimicking each other, which is really, really important for other things, believe me, but the father's play plays a very, very important role. What it does is it teaches the child that the child can make a difference by their reactions to the parent in what the parent does. And thereby the child comes to trust that they can have an influence on other people and that they make a difference socially, and they come to trust themselves. And that's very important. And they also learn that they can deal with people that are different than mom. It helps them so they can deal with outsiders and people outside the family, anybody different than mom. And it's really, really important. It sets that foundation for all their social communication after that.
Most people are not aware that this is so important for a child. Without a father playing with them and doing these things with them, there's a whole psychological phase of their life they're missing.
Yes, and fathers actually teach kids socially things that mothers don't teach throughout their development, just because they're different. Fathers just understand things differently than mothers do. And it's really important. It's good stuff to help them to communicate and do better socially as they grow.
Tell us, as they grow and they develop, how these things would interplay with the father. Point some of them out.
Well, fathers are good at things like dealing in the business world, and they are not always trying to be nice like mothers tend to do. They are more abrupt and honest and forthright most often. I'm not saying all, but it's not everybody. There are women that are more like that, but for the most part, men are more honest in their dealings.
In other words, women have been taught in our culture to placate and not to make waves, which is technically dishonest.
Yes, it is dishonest, because they're not telling the truth about how they really feel. And a man just does, and that's good. And it helps set boundaries, and people respect them more because of it. And if a child learns how to say no without guilt, or how to say the truth, they are going to get the respect that they need to do well in the real world. So fathers help with that. And I don't think a lot of people realize it.
There are many things, then, that fathers teach children that we don't think much about.
Before I move on, I would like to point out the differences between skilled fathers and unskilled fathers. A skilled father is considerate, and even though he might be playful, he's gentle with his child. An unskilled father says mean things and put downs and is insensitive. And it's very important for parents to treat their child with respect and as a human being. And an unskilled father won't do that. An unskilled mother won't do that either. But there is a difference, and that fathers tend to be harsher in their dealings when they are unskilled than most mothers are.
Parent training is necessary. Point out the positive side of this same thing that people can do to prevent this in their relationship and from marring their child.
Well, the thing that I saw over and over in research is that we need to encourage our children and allow them to explore within strict boundaries, because we need to protect them, right? So there has to be that balance. We can't just let a child do anything they want. They wouldn't live. So we have very strict boundaries, especially around safety and breaking things and stuff like that. But within those boundaries, we allow the child freedom to explore and freedom to interact with us about what they're discovering. And we let them lead and figure out what it is they're interested in. And we encourage that. A skilled father is respectful of his child as a human being. They're going to be gentle, they're going to explain things, and they're going to encourage that child in being who they are. And one of the things that also came out in study after study was that parents that were more concerned with obedience rather than self-direction in a child raise a different kind of child, that child is actually much less obedient than the other child.
The one that is taught to be obedient and not given choices actually rebels more?
Yes, they're much more rebellious. Mm-hmm. And so the more authoritarian you are with your child, the more trouble you're going to have.
So a skilled father gives explanations and justifications and directions
and choices.
And helps the child think through things.
Yes, exactly.
So just straight discipline actually hampers a child's ability to do that.
Exactly. And a 2-year-old can't really understand morality, right and wrong, because they're not there yet. They don't actually start understanding that sort of thing until they're about 3. And so to get mad at them for something you think that they should understand, they don't. You really need to explain it, and you need to teach them. So it's important that we do that. What we're supposed to be doing is teaching them, not punishing them every time you do something wrong, instead of constantly correcting them.
A skilled father, then, would express positive emotions instead of disgust or resentment or impatience.
Yes, exactly.
That says an awful lot about the skill level of a father when we see him behaving that way, doesn't it?
It does. And I think that fathers need to trust themselves and go ahead and be able to do that and know it's okay. Because what happens a lot of times is that young parents are influenced by their peers and by other people telling them what to do. And it's usually not the right thing because they don't know the child like the parent. They don't live with them. They're not their child. They need to follow their own gut on what's right and wrong instead of going along with what somebody else says.
So teaching a child blind obedience actually weakens them in dealing with the public in their own decision-making.
It does. And what's really interesting is that when a father is open to self-direction, he usually has a certain kind of a job. He does. It's really very interesting because a father who has complex work, which is work that usually deals with people, it takes decision-making and self-direction and free thinking, so being able to think for yourself and not just follow orders. That those kind of fathers are usually much better at allowing a child to have self-direction. But then, like I said, there's boundaries. There's got to be firm boundaries. But they're going to allow that child to explore and to learn and to provide an environment where the child can play with things and touch things and talk about things rather than just telling the child no every time they touch something, and then maybe they'll find something that they're allowed to touch, you see.
So a father who is naturally analytical and discriminating teaches his child to be analytical and discriminating.
He does. And then what happens is you've got a child that is less aggressive, proven over and over, gets along better with peers, is more leadership qualities, and also grows up to be a complex worker. Whereas a parent who goes with obedience above all, that thinks that obedience is the basis of moral development or whatever, that child is going to be more aggressive, more rebellious, and will not be able to make decisions well for themselves, will not have the confidence to go out and get what they want in life, and basically becomes not a complex worker, but someone that works with things, not people. So they're different. And so, I thought about this and I thought, well, here we have a lot of people that are raising their kids that way, that are just very authoritarian, and you better obey, and that's what I'm supposed to be teaching my kids. And I thought, well, why wouldn't that make sense? You got all the workers, the people, worker bees, and then you got the people that are the thinkers, and there's not as many of them. And I thought, no. That's not right. Instead, we just need to teach people to change their views on what is correct parenting and what is expected of them. Because, you see, parents are all, I think, trying to do what they should be doing. But some of them don't have the right idea about how to raise a child to grow up to be someone who is creative. And that's what happens when you allow this self-direction within boundaries, is you get someone that's creative and someone with leadership qualities and someone who really does things.
So many parents believe that obedience is the thing because that's the way they were raised, and they don't know any better. They don't know how to make decisions in their own lives,
right?
And so they can't teach their children. But if they could teach their children on the simplest level, cause and effect, and why things work the way they do,
that's right.
Even in tiny relationships, they would start learning.
Yes.
Even
and
when they're very small.
It would change the world.
It would change the world.
Yes. For a better world. We would have less violence. People that are raised this way get along so much better with other people. They actually care more and have more empathy for others. And not only that, they're more creative and they're thinkers, and so they're going to come up with answers and ways to make the world a better place.